And I think it was quite interesting in the sense that I got involved very quickly, and I sort of left very quickly. I mentally was in and out in terms of making that decision. But the actual process of sort of disengaging from the group, I'd say, took about 6 to 9 months because of the sort of level of buy-in you have to these groups. I was emotionally sort of stuck in with this group. All my friends were in this group. You know, you are so embedded in that sense that to pull yourself out, you pay a massive, I suppose, emotional penalty. You give up a lot of friendships and networks. So that was the difficult side of it. But you know, you can crack these dogmas. They are pretty easy to see through, and once you start to pick at them, they collapse very, very quickly. The difficulty, of course, I think, is engaging people in the debate sincerely, and bringing them to that table with an open mind. But I think if you can do that, then as we've seen, I mean, Hizb ut-Tahrir has been fairly decimated in Britain, and it's because you know, there have been a wave of defections, and those of us who have left have been able to speak to those inside that group and similar groups, and to help bring them out.
Thank you very much, Shiraz. I want to turn next to Hekmat Karzai, who runs very important and prominent research center, think tank institute in Kabul, who I know has carried out with his center a study of suicide bombings in Afghanistan and of the violent campaign. And perhaps, Hekmat, you can tell us a little bit about what you have found and the reasons why people in your country decide to go on these missions and become involved.
Sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me, at the outset, extend my congratulations to Madam Campbell and the Canadian team that's sitting there. As an Afghan, and particularly as someone whose hometown is Kandahar, I sincerely appreciate their efforts there in Kandahar. So with that, to your question. Yesterday I heard various statements, particularly in terms of, you know, why people join various groups, particularly, specifically in various different reasons. What we did was looked at various different factors. The perception in the West that majority of the terrorist leaders are all educated, whether you look at KSM or whether you look at Ayman al-Zawahiri, Osama bin Laden himself, a graduate of King Abdulaziz University. And also this notion that majority of these terrorists who are recruited really come through this clash of civilization factor, this Huntington factor. On the contrary, what we found out was there were various other factors that came into play on the ground. The first factor was that financial reasons. There was a significant amount of fighters that joined the various militant groups because they were paid well. They were paid much better than the government. When it came to suicide bombers, their families were really well taken care of. Several 100,000 Afghanis, that was one. Second, the revenge factor. When we looked at Afghanistan, Afghanistan is a collective society, it's a conservative society. So by killing one person, by disrespecting another person, you really take away the goodwill of an entire community. And we've had lots of civilian casualties and things like that, and that has provided another oxygen. The third component was this lack of governance. By governance, I do not mean, you know, the most basic of delivery. It's by isolation of various different groups, isolation of various different personalities, and status quo towards a particular individual. The fourth factor was this madrasa factor. Various of the bombers and various of the insurgents that we looked at, that we interviewed, many of them really were brainwashed to the extent they would make statements that absolutely had no coherence or logic to that extent. One individual just constantly kept saying that, look, there's a significant amount of proselytizing. Afghanistan is becoming a Christian state, so it is the personal obligation for all of us to conduct this personal jihad. And then lastly, a lot of these arguments were really wrapped up in this ideological context. I mean, a lot of the sermons of bin Laden or the sermons of the various different clerics, they were taught that, look, there is a direct confrontation. Afghanistan is becoming an occupied state, so you have to fight. So majority of these individuals that came in terms of their identities were not really educated individuals. Yes, I think if you look at the top tier of the leadership, you find individuals that are quite charismatic, that are able to, indoctrinate people. But at the commander level, at the foot soldier level, majority of them really came from an environment which was conducive to this recruitment process.
Thank you very much. The far end of the panel is Michael Semple, who is currently with the Carr Center at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and who has also spent a lot of time in Afghanistan talking to insurgents and a number of other people. What are your experiences? Do your first-hand experiences tally with some of the findings of Hekmat?
Yes, I think that Hikmat's right as he said that you just could not describe people's route into militancy in Afghanistan if you were looking somehow for some kind of social elite. Quite the opposite. Most of the people that I've encountered in Afghanistan who have been or are involved in Afghanistan, in militancy, they go into militancy as it's their social niche. It's a route for people who are essentially socially marginalized to find simultaneously a livelihood, a source of social status, and a role in defending group interests that they would not otherwise have as they stayed at the bottom of the heap. There's also a kind of peer pressure. Quite often the decision to move into militancy is not an individual decision. It's something which is essentially it's a group of peers, a group of friends, and by going in together, they become part of a peer network which looks after itself over the years. And also, when they enter militancy, it's not just joining a movement. It involves the decision to attach themselves to a particular leader or a commander inside that movement, who has a set of obligations to them. Essentially, will look after them, and in a way that can go on for years and years. You look at people who say now in 2010 are fighters. They are known as the comrades of the commander that they initially joined back in 1994. And his obligations to them are to keep them out of trouble, spring them from jail, get the money and look after them. So generally these are people who are coming from low social status, and they achieve an elevation of social status through their participation in militancy. And somewhat bizarrely, when we think of the stigma attached to terrorism over here, the kind of elevation in moral status something which they always, in relaxed movements, they describe it almost laughing. They say that when I don't have a Kalashnikov on my back, I'm just a poor kid that nobody talks to. When I have the Kalashnikov on my back and I am fighting with the movement, then I am immediately transformed to the status of a mujahid, a holy fighter. And when I knock on a door, people have to take me in and honor me and feed me, the same people who normally wouldn't spit at me. And if you want to take it to the ultimate extreme, that nowadays in much of southern Afghanistan, if you are of a traditional high status family but are now associated with government, when you die, it's difficult to find somebody who's prepared to read the funeral prayers. If you are somebody who has traditionally been from a low status background, but you've associated with the latest stage of the militant movement fighting against the government, when you die, people are queuing up to say your funeral prayers.
So status is very important.
Yes.
Would you agree with that, Hekmat?
Well, to a certain extent, you really have to look at different areas and different environments. There are commanders that have made names for themselves, but there are personalities who have joined, as I said, for various different reasons. But I wouldn't necessarily glorify it to that extent. I would not really make, heroes out of these individuals. I mean, these are individuals that are fighting for one or another reasons, and that's the end.
But isn't there a potential solution here, in the sense that if one of the reasons is status, perhaps some of our counter strategies should be directed at undermining the status?
Absolutely.